Hi, how are you? My name is Lisa, and I am the owner and maker behind Ayla Raven Boutique. I mostly make bags of different types, but I actually make a lot of different stuff. I make so many different things now. When I first started Ayla Raven, I was actually making tutus, and I had just had my second daughter, and we named her Ayla Raven. And I guess I just wasn't feeling very creative at the time, and I ended up naming my business Ayla Raven, and I was selling tutus. And I started out just selling locally to people, and then I went ahead and started my Etsy shop. And eventually, I think that I just started to get the itch to start sewing again. I started sewing when I was just a little girl, and my mom taught me, and she taught me how to do things, just make like small quilts and make small little things for my dolls. And then eventually, as a teenager and in my early 20s, I was making myself some clothes and getting creative with clothing. And then I stopped sewing for a while. I didn't have a sewing machine. And but I've always been really crafty. I've always liked making things. So when my daughters were born, I kind of just wanted something to do. I wasn't working at the time because I was home with them. And I just wanted something kind of to do on the side. So I learned how to make tutus with like the tulle and the headband, and you tie the tulle on to the headband, and it makes a little tutu. And I was doing those in different colors, and I started adding themes to them. And I just wanted to start sewing again. So I went and I got another sewing machine, like just a little brother sewing machine. And I made some quilts. I made my daughter a quilt, like just a little baby-sized quilt. And then after my dad passed, I made a quilt out of his t-shirt. He had a lot of t-shirts. He collected a lot of t-shirts. And so I made a quilt out of t-shirts. And I wanted to just keep with the sewing. I really love sewing. I've always loved like buying fabric and just everything that goes into it. So eventually I started making bags. I was making purses, and I really wanted to get into making like vinyl style purses, like purses with vinyl or faux leather. And I decided that I was going to learn how to use that. And it is a challenge at first when you're using vinyl because it can be very thick. And when you have a domestic sewing machine, it's not always domestic sewing machine friendly. I learned, how to make it work, and I was doing, fairly well. And I started making wallets, and I was making like different types of bags and making handbags and mini backpacks and crossbodies and all the different bags. I made like diaper bags and duffel bags and all different types of bags. And I eventually was building on that skill and building on that market for the different types of vinyl bags that were being sold. And I bought my Juki industrial sewing machine. It's a walking foot sewing machine. And so that is a beast, and it can go through all the different vinyl layers. It can go through the stabilizers and all of that. And that made my life a lot easier when I was doing the vinyl bags. I think eventually I just kind of got burnt out on vinyl. It was getting to be where I would have to buy such large quantities of it. And I know that seems like a good thing, but when you're buying like custom vinyl, they come either in like a yard, or you can like a lot of times get a roll. They're like 18 inches by I think like 54 inches long. And I mean, it's a pretty decent sized roll. And I couldn't use it all. I didn't know if a print was going to do well. A lot of it was like custom prints. And I didn't know if that was going to do well. So I didn't really use all of it. And so then I was just kind of having vinyl sit there. And it just wasn't working for me. I wanted to go back to using the cotton fabrics, cotton woven fabrics, and quilt cotton fabrics, because you can get those, in a quarter yard, fat quarter, half yard, full yard, multiple yards. You have a little bit more freedom with how much you're buying. So I wanted to get back to that, and I just really like the different prints that are available on cotton woven fabrics. So I decided that I was going to try out the cotton woven fabrics, And in order to make bags out of those types of fabrics, though, you have to use very heavy stabilizers. So you have to usually put on a layer of the woven interfacing, and then you would put on like Decaville, or you could use fusible fleece, or some people use foam, some people use Pellon, like 809. And I noticed that whenever I use those fusible interfacings, even when I put in that woven interfacing first, if I try to put on like the Decaville or the fusible fleece or the foam or the Pellon, especially like any of those, when I would go to turn my bag out, it would be very wrinkled. And I it was bothering me. It was not something that I felt was up to the standard of what I was trying to produce, of what I was trying to do. So you can steam them, you can use the hair dryer, you can use the iron on them, try and get the wrinkles out. But I feel like no matter what I did, you could still see the outline of those wrinkles on there. And it just was not for me. That's not what I was going for. So I wanted to start making bags, but I didn't want to use the fusible interfacings because of all the wrinkles. So I was like, I'm going to try like maybe going Vera Bradley style and do some quilting, do like a quilting bags. And this was a really good option for me because I was able to use my woven quilt cottons, and I was able to stabilize them with batting. And instead of fusing them on with an iron, I was able to quilt them on, and then I wouldn't have any wrinkles when I was turning my bags out. And it just kind of went from there. So then I started making quilted bags, and I love them so much. I love quilting. I love the quilted look. I think that it is just very classic and it's timeless, and they're fun to do, and I can sit and quilt and put on an audiobook or put on a YouTube or put on anything and just listen and quilt. And I could do that for hours. So that is pretty much where I'm at right now with my bag making. I may go back to vinyl eventually. I'm not sure. I still have vinyl. Sometimes I get an itch to use it and I'll bring it out and I will make something with it. And I might go back to it, but like currently right now, what I am enjoying is the quilting. I'm using the quilt cotton fabrics. The first thing that I learned how to do when I was sewing was actually quilting. So my mom would teach me how to sew together. It's very good, beginner friendly, very good way for kids to learn is because you're sewing together little squares or strips, and it's just straight stitches and sewing them all together to make a bigger piece. And then she showed me how to use the batting and the binding and the backing and the quilting and all of that to make the final product. So this was actually something that kind of took me back to my roots as well. So I really enjoy it. I love the quilting. So what I wanted to talk about today was switching up from those stabilizers that I was used to, such as the Pellon and the fusible interfacing, the Decaville and all of that, and switching over to batting. So I noticed with batting, when I first started, like when I first picked back up the quilting method, I just ran to Walmart and I got some polyfill. And that is just kind of a cheaper and batting that is available pretty much at any craft store. They have it at Walmart. You can get it. It's very readily available. You don't necessarily have to order that. You can just run out to the store and you can get that. And so that's what I did, just so I can start quilting and make something and kind of see how it goes and how I liked it and how it looked. And I loved the quilting and I loved the final product, but what I didn't like was the batting. I was having a lot of problems with it. And the thing with polyfill is it isn't very cheap batting. I got the polyester high loft kind, and it is very cheap. It's got chunks in it. I don't know if anybody else has noticed that when they buy that type of batting, like it has like chunks of like balled up fiber in it. And those balls would get stuck in my machine and it would cause my foot to not be able to move. And then I was like stitching these little tiny stitches because it was stuck. And that was annoying. I didn't like that. And then I also noticed there was something called bearding. So whenever you get a kind of a cheaper brand of batting and you put it especially behind like a black fabric, you're going to get something called bearding. And it is when the little fibers of the batting poke through the cotton woven fabric that you're using, and you can see the little fibers sticking out. And that does not look appealing to me. That was not what I was going for at all with what I wanted it to look like in the final product. So I kind of did some research on that, and I just realized that polyfill was the problem. Like that was not the type of batting that I should be using for the result that I was wanting to get. So I started buying Hobbs batting, and I buy mine from Linda's Electric Quilters. And I can link that shop in the description, and you could check it out. She has really good, or that business that there's, I believe they're a small business, but they have really good options. They have a lot of different interfacings to choose from. I even get my fusible fleece from there now because I prefer the Bosel brand, and they have the Bosel brand there. And they have the Hobbs brand batting, which is my preference. I love Hobbs batting. It is soft, it is pillowy, there are no chunks, there is no bearding. It's just really good quality batting. So that is what I use now. And I don't output a lot, so I don't need to buy it in bulk. If you're just like making tons and tons of items, you might want to look into getting something like maybe more wholesale, or where you can buy large quantities. But for my output, for what I make, the rolls that I get from Linda's are just fine. They work just fine for me. It's plenty. So I wanted to kind of show you like the types of batting that I've been using and the difference between them. So these are both Hobbs battings. So these are the two battings that I have been using. They're both Hobbs brand. This one is called Cloud Loft, and I absolutely love this batting. It is very soft. It's very plushy. It really gives that quilted, just like a tufted look when you're quilting with it. And so this one is hard to find though. This particular one is hard to find. I grabbed the last roll at, I believe it was fatquarters.com or something like that. It said that there was one in stock, and I grabbed it because it's hard to find. Now you can go on to Linda's Electric Quilters, where I buy like all my batting, and they have it there, but it's available for pre-orders. So I don't know like if it's just really popular, or like there's just a supply issue with it, but it is hard to find. So whenever I can find it, I like to grab some, and it is just very soft. I love it's so nice. It's got such a nice feel to it, and it's really great for bags. It's coarser, but that doesn't matter if you're using it, like if you're just using it for bags, and I think it's perfect for that because it's stiff and it gives a nice stabilization to the bags that you're using to quilt. This is another batting by Hobbs. And this is one that I usually get because this is the one that's more readily available. This is super soft. It's so soft, and it's very, again, plushy, not as plushy as this one. This one's like super high loft. This one is still a high loft batting, but it is not quite as thick as this one. And I don't know if you can see the difference there, but there's a difference in the thickness there. This one's a lot more lofty than this one. This one still provides a good amount of fluffiness though. And this is just their polyester, Hobbs polyester batting. And these are just really good quality battings. Like I said, they don't have chunks in them that get stuck in your sewing machine. They do not cause the bearding problem. And they're really nice to work with. So these are my favorites. When I started making the makeup bags, I wanted my makeup bags to be a little bit more stabilized. And this idea actually came from another maker here on YouTube. Her name is Taylor Rose, and she is such a lovely person. I would suggest checking out her channel if you haven't yet. She's brilliant. But she was making boxy bags. She started making those. And in fact, I use her patterns to make my boxy bags. And I mean, a boxy bag is just a boxy bag. Like it's not rocket science. You can come up with your own pattern in your own way, your own method, measurements, and all of that. But I mean, it's just a boxy bag at the end of the day. And I wanted to support her. So I bought her pattern and I use her patterns. And boxy bags come in all different sizes. And so I just use hers. And she has a great tutorial on YouTube and everything. But her method when she makes her boxy bags to add a little bit more stabilization is on top of her regular batting, or wadding as she calls it there in Australia. She also adds a second layer of cotton batting, and it just adds a little bit more structure. And I 100% agree. This is a very good way to make a bag that you want to have a quilted look and a softness, but a nice structure to it, a nice shape to it. This is a really good method. So that is what I started doing as well. And so again, I use Hobbs. I get it from Linda's Electric Quilters. And I just buy this by the roll, and you get a good amount, and I just put this on top of my polyester batting, and then I put my fabric on top of that, and then I do my quilting, and it makes a really great structure for the boxy bags. And so just as an example, this is one of my boxy bags that I made, and it's just got a nice shape to it. It's not super flimsy. It has both layers. It has a layer of the batting, and then it has a layer of the quilt cotton on top of it. Actually, I think for this one I used just a piece of fleece over top instead of the cotton batting, because I didn't have any cotton batting at the time. But it's a very similar thickness, and it gives a very similar result. So this is just an example of like what it would look like with both of those battings together, sandwiched together, layered together with the fabric. This is one of my little shoulder bags that I make. This is at a corduroy, so it is a thicker fabric. But I don't quilt these. I use batting. I use the polyester batting, and I just baste around it, and I don't quilt it, and I just use that one layer. And you can see how soft it is, how flimsy, and I'm going for that. That's the look I'm going for, a slouchy look with this particular bag. Like it's just, as an example, you can see how soft it is. It's very soft. So that's the difference between using just one layer of batting versus using two layers of the polyester and the cotton batting. So that is my suggestion if you're looking for something with a little bit more shape, a little bit more structure. That's a really good method. It's not super expensive either. Another thing that I wanted to talk about as far as batting is concerned is how I prep my batting. So I have a method of fluffing my batting. I like lofty batting. I like my batting fluffy. I like that real puffy look to it. In fact, and I have an example of like what I mean by a puffy batting, but I don't know if you can tell by looking at this. This is one that I quilted yesterday, and I used just the cotton fabric, quilt cotton fabric, and I used the two layers of batting. This has the cloud loft batting as well, so it's got a lot of like plush to it. It's poofy and puffy, and I love that look. That is my favorite type of quilted look. So how you quilt and how far apart you quilt your lines and how many lines you put, it makes a difference too. So that these squares, like being like this, I just quilted over the squares that were already on the fabric. This is going to cause, with them being this far apart and the squares this big, this is going to create a very nice puffy look. So that makes a difference as well. But anyways, I like my batting to be nice and fluffy. So what I do to fluff it is when I take it out of the bag, it usually will cut it if it's like the big queen size. Usually I will cut it in half or into thirds. It's like the big roll that I get, like the king size roll, because it's just easier to work with when it's in a smaller piece, and it's easier for me to fluff. So I will take it out, I will cut a piece off of it, and I will put that into my dryer. I will shake it out, make sure it's all unfolded, put it in the dryer, and then I will add some sprays of with my little mist sprayer. And I'll just kind of get it around, get it kind of misted in there, and get it damp. And then I turn it on to a time low heat for about 15 minutes. And then when I take it out, it is really fluffy. It just fluffs it out, and I don't fold it or roll it or mash it to store it. I keep it into a nice folded, loose folded piece, and then I just store it somewhere so that it doesn't get smashed down. So that's what I do with both, or with all my battings that I get that are not fusible. You don't want to put anything fusible in the dryer. Obviously, that's not a good idea. But anything that is not fusible, like all my battings, I fluff them in the dryer first with a little bit of mist. And I always get really great results when I store them. I try to keep them in a nice loose state so that they stay nice and fluffy. When I'm quilting, after I'm done quilting, I see a lot of people when they're quilting press their quilted piece. So like if they're making a boxy bag or something out of it, they like to press it and steam it. And I understand why they're doing that, like just trying to get out the wrinkles and trying to make it look good. And if you're going for a flat look or a pressed look, then that's perfect. Like go ahead and do that. I don't like to do that. I kind of cringe when I see people like put an iron and press down on their quilted piece, because you're smashing your loftiness. You're smashing all of that beautiful puffiness. So I don't like to do that. I personally don't do that. I try to keep it as fluffy as possible for as long as possible. So I don't like to press mine, but I know a lot of people do that. So it's just personal preference. Um, so anyways, that is what I was going to talk about today, was just the different battings, what I use, what I like, differences, what combinations are good. And it's always good to play around with them, see what you like, see how many layers you like, see, if you like using one type of batting, two type of battings, or if you just like using regular stabilizer as well. I just, like I said, I couldn't deal with the wrinkles as far as like fusible interfacings. So currently I have been doing all the quilting for the boxy bags. I've been working on these for the last couple of days, and I am making a video showing how I do that. So that will go up, and this is what the stack I have left. And you can see all that beautiful fluffiness. And then over here is what I have already quilted. This is my quilted stack. And I counted, and there's going to be about 50 boxy bags that I'm going to be making, all in different sizes. There's going to be a tiny, a mini, and then the medium size. I don't make really big ones. For me, they don't sell as well. People like the smaller sized ones. So that's more what I'm concentrating on, is making the smaller size bags. But they're adorable. They're so cute. And I'm going to be working on that. And I am documenting all of that. So I will, when I'm finished with that project, I'll go ahead and post that, and you can see everything that goes into making all 50 of those bags. And then my last video, I talked about my next project, which is going to be the handmade scoops, or the lucky scoops. So I am working on a series of items that are going to go into that project. So I've already made some, and I introduced what those items were. My next product that I am working on is the boxy bags in the different sizes. And then I'm going to be moving on to the next thing. So I'm going to show you all the different things that I'm doing, and we'll be able to see the end product, and hopefully, everybody enjoys that. So that's all that I have for today, though. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I hope that I was able to give you some insight on battings and working with battings, and kind of going outside of the realm of actual quilt blankets and using battings and quilting for other products that are just, they turn out so beautiful. And if you have any questions or comments, please let me know. I would love to hear from anybody and everybody. Until we get going on these boxy bags, though, I will see you next time. Bye.